Amr ibn al-Sahmī was the Arab commander who led the Muslim conquest of Egypt and served as its governor in 640 to 646 and 658 to 664. The son of a wealthy Qurayshite, Amr embraced Islam in c. 629 and was assigned important roles in the nascent Muslim community by the Islamic prophet Muhammad. The first caliph Abu Bakr, r. 632 to 634, appointed Amr as a commander of the conquest of Syria. He conquered most of Palestine, to which he was appointed governor, and led the Arabs to decisive victories over the Byzantines at the battles of Ajnadayn and Yarmouk in 634 and 636. Amr launched the conquest of Egypt on his own initiative in late 639, defeating the Byzantines in a string of victories ending with the surrender of Alexandria in 641 or 642. It was the swiftest of the early Muslim conquests. This was followed by westward advances by Amr as far as Tripoli in present-day Libya. In a treaty signed with the Byzantine governor Cyrus, Amr guaranteed the security of Egypt's population and imposed a poll tax on non-Muslim adult males. He maintained the Coptic-dominated bureaucracy and cordial ties with the Coptic patriarch Benjamin. He founded Fustat as the provincial capital with the mosque later called after him at its center. Amr ruled relatively independently, acquired significant wealth, and upheld the interests of the Arab conquerors who formed Fustat's garrison in relation to the central authorities in Medina. After gradually diluting Amr's authority, Caliph Uthman, r. 644 to 656, dismissed him in 646 after accusations of incompetency from his successor Abdallah ibn Sa'd. After mutineers from Egypt assassinated Uthman, Amr distanced himself from their cause, despite previously instigating opposition against Uthman. In the ensuing First Muslim Civil War, Amr joined Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan against Caliph Ali, r. 656 to 661, due to promises of the governorship of Egypt and its tax revenues. Amr served as Muawiyah's representative in the abortive arbitration talks to end the war. Afterward, he wrested control of Egypt from Ali's loyalists, killing its governor Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and assumed the governorship instead. Muawiyah kept him in his post after establishing the Umayyad Caliphate in 661, and Amr ruled the province until his death. Amr ibn al-ʿＡṣ was born in c. 573. His father, al-ʿAṣ ibn Wa'il, was a wealthy landowner from the Banu Zam clan of the Quraysh tribe of Mecca. Following the death of al-ʿAṣ in c. 622, Amr inherited from him the lucrative al-Wat estate and vineyards near Taif. Amr's mother was al-Nabiyyah bint Harmala from the Banu Jalan clan of the Anazar tribe. She had been taken captive and sold, in succession, to several members of the Quraysh, one of whom was Amr's father. As such, Amr had two maternal half-brothers, Amr ibn Atatha of the Banu Adi and Uqba ibn Nafi of the Banu Fire, and a half-sister from the Banu Obad Shams. Amr is physically described in the traditional sources as being short with broad shoulders, having a large head with a wide forehead and wide mouth, long arms and a long beard. There are conflicting reports about when Amr embraced Islam, with the most credible version placing it in 629–630, not long before the conquest of Mecca by Muhammad. According to this account, he converted alongside the Qurayshites Khalid ibn al-Walid and Uthman ibn Talha. According to Amr's own testimony, transmitted by his fourth-generation descendant Amr ibn Shaib, he converted in Aksum in the presence of King Amr, Najashi, and met Muhammad in Medina upon the latter's return from the Battle of Khaybar in 628. Amr conditioned his conversion on the forgiveness of his past sins and an active part in affairs, according to a report cited by the historian Ibn Asakir, d. 1176. Indeed, in October 629, Amr was tasked by Muhammad with leading the raid on al-Salazal, likely located in the northern Hejaz, western Arabia, a lucrative opportunity for Amr in view of the potential war spoils. The purpose of the raid is unclear, though the modern historian Fred Donner speculates that it was to break up a gathering of hostile tribal groups possibly backed by the Byzantine Empire. The historian Ibn Hisham, d. 833, holds that Amr rallied the nomadic Arabs in the region to make war on Byzantine, Syria. The tribal groups targeted in the raid included the Qudai in general and the Bali specifically. Amr's paternal grandmother hailed from the Bali, and this may have motivated his appointment to the command by Muhammad, as Amr was instructed to recruit tribesmen from the Bali and the other Qudai tribes of Borkain and Banu Udra. Following the raid, a delegation of the Bali embraced Islam. Amr further consecrated ties with the tribe by marrying a Bali woman, with whom he had his son Muhammad. Muhammad appointed Amr the governor of Oman, and he remained there until being informed of Muhammad's death in 632. The death of Muhammad prompted several Arab tribes to defect from the nascent Medina-based Muslim polity in the Ridda Wars. Muhammad's successor Caliph Abu Bakr, r. 632–634, appointed Amr to reign in the apostate Qudai tribes, and among those targeted were the Hijazi branches of the Bali. Amr's campaigns, which were supported by the commander Shurabil ibn Hassana, succeeded in restoring Medina's authority as far as the northern frontier with Syria. Amr was one of 4 commanders dispatched by Abu Bakr to conquer Syria in 633. The focus of Amr's campaign was Palestine, to which he had been appointed governor by Abu Bakr before his departure. As a Qurayshite merchant, Amr was likely already well acquainted with the routes to Gaza, a principal terminal for Meccan caravans. He took the coastal route of the Hejaz, reaching Ayla, a Muslim possession since 630, before breaking west into the Negev desert or possibly the Sinai. He arrived near the villages of Dathan and Bodon in Gaza's environs, where he entered into talks with Gaza's Byzantine commander. After the negotiations broke down, Amr's men bested the Byzantines at the Battle of Dathan on 4th of February 634 and set up headquarters at Gama al-Arabat in the middle of the Wadi Araba. Most accounts hold that Amr's army was 3,000 strong, the Muhajirin, emigrants from Mecca to Medina, and the Ansar, natives of Medina, who together formed the core of the earliest Muslim converts, dominated his forces according to al-Waqidi, d. 823, while the 9th century historian Ibn Atam holds that Amr's army consisted of 3,300 Qurayshite and allied horsemen, 1,700 horsemen from the Banu Sulaym and 200 from the Yemenite tribe of Madhij. The historian Philip Mason considers the troop figures to be unquestionably exaggerated but still representing the largest Arab fighting force to have ever been assembled in southern Palestine and the Sinai until then. Amr conquered the area around Gaza by February or March 634 and proceeded to besiege Caesarea, the capital of Byzantine Palestine, in July. He soon after abandoned the siege upon the approach of a large Byzantine army. After being reinforced by the remainder of the Muslim armies in Syria, including the new arrivals commanded by Khalid ibn al-Walid, Amr, with overall command of the 20,000-strong Muslim forces, routed the Byzantine army at the Battle of Ajnadayn, the first major confrontation between the Muslims and Byzantium, in July to August 634. Amr occupied numerous towns in Palestine, including Beit Jibrin, Yibna, Amwas, Lydda, Jaffa, Nablus, and Sebastia. Most of these localities surrendered after little resistance due to the flight of Byzantine troops. Consequently, there is scant information about them in the traditional accounts of the conquest. Abu Bakr's successor Umar, r. 634–644, appointed or confirmed Amr as the commander of the military district of Palestine. The Muslims pursued the Byzantine army northward and besieged them at Pella for 4 months. Amr may have retained overall command of the Muslim armies until this point, though other accounts assign command to Khalid or Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. In any case, the Muslims landed a heavy blow against the Byzantines in the ensuing Battle of Fal in December 634 or January 635. Afterward, Amr and Shurabil may have been sent to besiege Basin, which capitulated after minor resistance. The Muslims proceeded to besiege Damascus, where the remnants of the Byzantine army from the battles of Ajnadayn and Fal had gathered. Amr was positioned at the Bab Tuma gate, the Muslim commanders having each been assigned to block one of the city's entrances. By August to September 635, Damascus surrendered to the Muslims. Amr acquired several residences within the city. In response to the series of defeats, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, r. 610–641, led a large army in person to confront the Muslims. Its rout at the Battle of Yarmouk, in which Amr played a key role by confining the Byzantines between the banks of the Yarmouk River and the Yarmouk's ravine, in August to September 636, paved the way for the rest of Syria's conquest by the Muslims. Following Yarmouk, the Muslims attempted to capture Jerusalem, where Amr had previously sent an advance force. Abu Ubaidah led the siege of Jerusalem, in which Amr participated, but the city only surrendered after Caliph Umar arrived in person to conclude a treaty with its defenders. Amr was one of the witnesses of the Treaty of Umar. From Jerusalem, Amr proceeded to besiege and capture the city of Gaza. From his base in southern Palestine, Amr launched the conquest of Byzantine Egypt. He had established trading interests there before his conversion to Islam, making him aware of its importance in international trade. The traditional Muslim sources generally hold that Amr undertook the campaign with Caliph Umar's reluctant approval, though a number of accounts hold that he entered the region without Umar's authorization. At the head of the 4,000 cavalries and with no siege engines, Amr arrived at the frontier town of al-ʿＡṣ along the northern Sinai coastline on 12th of December 639. He captured the strategic Mediterranean port city of Pelusium, al-Faramah, following a month-long siege, and moved against Belbase, which also fell after a month-long siege. Amr halted his campaign before the fortified Byzantine stronghold of Babylon, at the head of the Nile Delta, and requested reinforcements from Umar. The latter dispatched al-Zubair ibn al-Awwam, a leading Qurayshite companion of Muhammad, with a 4,000-strong force, which joined Amr's camp in June 640. Amr retained the supreme command of Arab forces in Egypt. In the following month, his army decisively defeated the Byzantines at the Battle of Heliopolis. He captured Memphis soon after and besieged Babylon. During the siege, Amr entered truce negotiations with the Alexandria-based Byzantine governor Cyrus. Emperor Heraclius opposed the talks and recalled Cyrus to Constantinople. Though strong resistance was put up by Babylon's defenders, their morale was sapped after news of Heraclius' death in February 641. Amr made an agreement with the Byzantine garrison, allowing their peaceful withdrawal toward the provincial capital Alexandria on 9th of April 641. Amr then sent his lieutenants to conquer different parts of the country. One of them, Khaija ibn Hudafa, captured the Fayoum oasis, Oxyrhynchus, Barnasa, Hermopolis, El-Ashmanain, and Akhmim, all in Middle Egypt, and an unspecified number of villages in Upper Egypt. In late 641, Amr besieged Alexandria. It fell virtually without resistance after Cyrus, who had since been restored to office, and Amr finalized a treaty in Babylon guaranteeing the security of Egypt's inhabitants and imposing a poll tax on adult males. The date of the city's surrender was likely November 642. Taking advantage of the uncertain political situation in the wake of Umar's death in 644 and the meager Arab military presence in Alexandria, Emperor Constans II, r. 641–668, dispatched a naval expedition led by a certain Manuel, which occupied the city and killed most of its Arab garrison in 645. Alexandria's elite and most of the inhabitants assisted the Byzantines, medieval Byzantine, Coptic and, to a lesser extent, Muslim sources indicate the city was not firmly in Arab hands during the preceding 3 years. Byzantine forces pushed deeper into the Nile Delta, but Amr forced them back at the Battle of Nikiu. He besieged and captured Alexandria in the summer of 646. Most of the Byzantines, including Manuel, were slain. Many of its inhabitants were killed and the city was burned until Amr ordered an end to the onslaught. Afterward, Muslim rule in Alexandria was gradually solidified. In contrast to the disarray of the Byzantine defense, the Muslim forces under Amr's command were unified and organized. Amr frequently coordinated with Caliph Umar and his own troops for all major military decisions. According to the historian Vasilius Christides, Amr cautiously counterbalanced the superiority in numbers and equipment of the Byzantine army by applying skillful military tactics, and despite the lack of definite, prepared, long-term plans, the Arab army moved with great flexibility as the occasion arose. In the absence of siege engines, Amr oversaw long sieges of heavily fortified Byzantine positions, most prominently Babylon, cut supply lines and engaged in long wars of attrition. He made advantageous use out of the nomads in his ranks, who were seasoned in hit-and-run tactics, and his settled troops, who were generally more acquainted with siege warfare. His cavalry-dominated army moved through Egypt's deserts and oases with relative ease. Moreover, political circumstances became more favorable to armor with the death of the hawkish Heraclius and his short-term replacement with the more pacifist Heraclonas and Martina. After the surrender of Alexandria in 642, Arma marched his army westward, bypassing the fortified Byzantine coastal strongholds of Pari-Etonium, Marsa Matru, Apollonia Susa, Marsa Susa, and Ptolemais, Tomita, capturing Barsa and reaching Torca in Cyrenaica. Toward the end of the year, Arma launched a second cavalry assault targeting Tripoli. The city was heavily fortified by the Byzantines and contained several naval vessels in its harbor. Due to his lack of siege engines, he employed the lengthy siege tactic used in the Egyptian conquest. After about a month, his troops entered Tripoli through a vulnerable point in its walls and sacked the city. Its fall, which entailed the evacuation by sea of the Byzantine garrison and most of the population, is dated to 642 or 643–44. Though the Arab hold over Cyrenaica and Zawiya to the far south remained firm for decades except for a short-lived Byzantine occupation in 690, Tripoli was recaptured by the Byzantines a few years after Arma's entry. The region was definitively conquered by the Arabs during the reign of Caliph Abd al-Malik, r. 685 to 705. Arma regulated the government of the country, Egypt, administration of justice and the imposition of taxes, according to the historian A.J. Wensink. During his siege of Babylon, Arma had erected an encampment near the fortress. He originally intended for Alexandria to serve as the Arabs' capital in Egypt, but Umar rejected this on the basis that no body of water, i.e., the Nile, should separate the caliph from his army. Instead, following Alexandria's surrender, in 641 or 642, Arma made his encampment near Babylon the permanent garrison town, Misr, of Fustat, the first town founded by the Arabs in Egypt. Its location along the eastern bank of the Nile River and at the head of the Nile Delta, and edge of the eastern desert strategically positioned it to dominate the upper and lower halves of Egypt. Fustat's proximity to Babylon, where Arma also established an Arab garrison, afforded the Arab settlers a convenient means to employ and oversee the Coptic bureaucratic officials who inhabited Babylon, and proved critical to running the day-to-day affairs of the Arab government. Arma had the original tents of Fustat replaced with mud brick and baked brick dwellings. Documents found in Hermopolis, el-ʿＡṣ, dating from the 640s confirm official orders to forward building materials to Babylon to construct the new city. The city was organized into allotments over an area stretching 5 to 6 kilometers, 3.1 to 3.7 miles, along the Nile and 1 to 2 kilometers, 0.62 to 1.24 miles, inland to the east. The allotments were distributed among the components of Arma's army, with priority given to the Quraysh, the Ansar and Arma's personal guard, the al-Raya, people of the banner, which included several Bali tribesmen as a result of their kinship and marital ties to Arma. An opposing theory holds that Amr did not assign the plots. Rather, the tribes staked their own claims and Amr established a commission to resolve the ensuing land disputes. At the center of the new capital, Amr built a congregational mosque, later known as the Mosque of Amr ibn al-ʿās. The original structure was frequently redesigned and expanded between its foundation and its final form in 827. Amr had his own dwelling built immediately east of the mosque, and it most likely served as his government headquarters. In the northwestern part of Alexandria, Amr built a hilltop congregational mosque, later called after him, before the Byzantine occupation of 645–46, after which he built a second called the Mosque of Mercy. Neither mosque has been presently identified. Adjacent to the congregational mosque, Amr took personal ownership of a fort, which he later donated for government use. This part of the city became the administrative and social core of Arab settlement in Alexandria. Accounts vary as to the number of troops Amr garrisoned in the city, ranging from 1,000 soldiers from the Azda and Banu Faham tribes to a quarter of the army, which was replaced on a rotational basis every 6 months. As per the 641 treaty with Cyrus, Amr imposed a poll tax of 2 gold dinars on non-Muslim adult males. He imposed other measures, sanctioned by Umar, that entailed the inhabitants' regular provision of wheat, honey, oil and vinegar as a subsistence allowance for the Arab troops. He had these goods stored in a distribution warehouse called Dar al-Rizq. After taking a census of the Muslims, he further ordered that each Muslim be annually supplied by the inhabitants a highly embroidered wool robe. Egyptian robes were prized by the Arabs, a burnous, a turban, a surwal, trousers, and shoes. In a Greek papyrus dated to 8th of January 643 and containing Amr's seal, a fighting bull, Amr, transliterated as Ambrose, requests fodder for his army's animals and bread for his soldiers from an Egyptian village. According to the historian Martin Hines, there is no evidence that Amr did anything to streamline the cumbersome fiscal system taken over from the Byzantines. Rather, the upheavals of conquest can only have made the system more open to abuse than ever. After entering Alexandria, Amr invited the Coptic patriarch Benjamin to return to the city after his years of exile under Cyrus. The patriarch maintained close ties with Amr and restored the monasteries of Wadi el-Natran, including the St. Macarius monastery, which functions until the present day. According to the historian Hugh N. Kennedy, Benjamin played a major role in the survival of the Coptic Church through the transition to Arab rule. Amr acted relatively independent as governor and retained much of the surplus tax revenue of the province for the benefit of its troops despite pressure from Umar to forward proceeds to Medina. He also amassed significant personal wealth in Egypt, part of which was confiscated by Muhammad ibn Muslim on Umar's orders. At a certain point, the caliph separated Upper Egypt from Amr's administration and appointed Ubayd Allah ibn Abisar over the region. Umar's successor Caliph Uthman, r. 644–656, initially kept Amr in his governorship and forged marital links with him by wedding to him his maternal half-sister Kulthum bint Uqba ibn Abi Mayt. Uthman diluted Amr's power in 645–46 by transferring fiscal responsibilities to Ibn Abisar, his own relative, leaving Amr in charge of military affairs. Amr and Ibn Abisar lodged complaints to Uthman, each alleging the other of incompetence, prompting Uthman to dismiss Amr entirely, and replace him in his duties with Ibn Abisar. Uthman's appointee established an effective fiscal system that largely preserved its Byzantine predecessor. Ibn Abisar reduced the fiscal privileges of Egypt's original Arab military settlers, who had been shown favor by Amr, and secured the remittance of the surplus to Medina. This led to the consternation of the Arab garrisons and the native officials and elite, all of whom were deprived of the opportunities for self-enrichment which they had hitherto enjoyed, according to Hines. Open opposition to Ibn Abisar and Uthman began under the leadership of the Qurayshite Muhammad ibn Abi Hudhayfa in 654–55. Upon his return to Medina, Amr divorced Kulthum and openly criticized Uthman. The Caliph and Amr engaged in a number of heated public exchanges and, according to a report in the Islamic traditional sources, Amr incited Muhammad's senior companions Ali, al-Zubair and Talha ibn Ubaydallah, as well as the Hajj pilgrims in Mecca, against Uthman. He lobbied Muhammad's wife Aisha for support, and the latter pressed Uthman to reappoint Amr to Egypt, citing its garrison's satisfaction with his rule. In a sermon at the mosque in Medina in June 656 and a letter penned to the Muslim leaders in Syria, Uthman mentioned that he had intended to reappoint Amr but did not follow through as a result of the latter's excessive insult. According to the historian Wilfred Madelung, the insult Uthman cited was likely Amr's public reaction to the caliph's statement that the mutinous Egyptian troops who had arrived in Medina to protest the caliph's policies had withdrawn because they were misinformed. Fear God, Uthman, for you have ridden over abysses and we have ridden over them with you. So repent to God, that we may repent. After his last exchange with Uthman, Amr retired to his estate in southern Palestine. The estate was called Ilan after one of his Mawali, non-Arab, Muslim freedmen, and was located in the vicinity of al-Sab, which had conventionally been identified with modern Beersheba, but more likely corresponds with Beit Jibrin, according to the historian Michael Lecker. The medieval historians al-Baladuri, d. 892, and Yoqut al-Hamawi, d. 1226, also suggest that Ilan was located in the area of Beit Jibrin. Amr had likely become owner of the estate through a caliphal grant, though he possibly could have taken possession of it in the course of his conquest of Palestine, and his ownership had been confirmed by the caliphs. He lived on the estate, where he derived agricultural revenue, with his sons Muhammad and Abd Allah. At his estate Amr received news of the siege of Uthman and the caliph's subsequent assassination by Amr's Egyptian partisans. The roughly 400 to 600 Egyptian mutineers had protested Uthman's fiscal centralization policies in Medina, and accused him of favoring his relatives over the early Muslim converts. The caliph persuaded them to withdraw, but after they intercepted a letter on their departure ordering Ibn Abisar to punish them, they turned back and assaulted Uthman in his home. In an anecdote cited by al-Baladuri, Amr is quoted taking partial credit for Uthman's killing. Ali succeeded Uthman, but did not reappoint Amr to his post in Egypt. Amr was one of a number of figures held culpable for Uthman's death by the slain caliph's clan, the Banu Umayyads, most prominently by Uthman's uterine brother and Amr's former brother-in-law al-Walid ibn Uqba. Nonetheless, the governor of Syria, which included Palestine, the Umayyad Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan had left Amr on his estate undisturbed. As pressure from the Umayyads increased against him, Amr distanced himself from any role in Uthman's death and wrote Muawiyah to execute or banish the participating Egyptian troops who had been apprehended when they passed through Muawiyah's jurisdiction on their way back to Egypt. After Ali's victory against al-Zubair, Talha and Aisha at the Battle of the Camel in Iraq, Muawiyah, who maintained his opposition to Ali, became the focus of the caliph's attention. Muawiyah summoned Amr to discuss an alliance against Ali. In the ensuing negotiations, Amr pressed Muawiyah for lifetime possession of Egypt, to which Muawiyah ultimately acceded after being persuaded by his brother Uqba ibn Abi Sufyan. The public agreement, composed by Amr's Moor warden and made in Jerusalem, secured Amr's allegiance to Muawiyah in return for the latter's assistance in gaining control of Egypt from Ali's governor. According to Madelung, the alliance between Muawiyah and Amr b. al-ʿās constituted a formidable political force. In forging the alliance, Muawiyah sought to benefit from Amr's political acumen, practical battle experience and sure judgment of military strategy and tactics, as well as his expertise and support base in Egypt. Amr became Muawiyah's chief advisor. To secure the defense of his Syrian realm from Ali's loyalists in Egypt, Amr counseled Muawiyah to secure the support of the Judamite chief in Palestine, Natil ibn Qais, by ignoring his seizure of the district treasury. Natil subsequently joined Muawiyah's cause. Amr then advised Muawiyah to lead the Syrian army in person against Ali, who began his march towards Syria in late May 657. When Ali's army set up camp around Siffin, south of the Euphrates town of Raqqa, in early June, Muawiyah's advance guard led by Abu Bakr refused them access to the watering places under their control. After Ali protested, Amr advised Muawiyah to accept their request as preventing access to water might rally the hitherto demotivated Iraqis to a determined fight against the Syrians. Muawiyah refused and the Iraqis subsequently defeated the Syrians led by Amr and Abu Bakr in a skirmish known as the Day of the Euphrates. As head of the Syrian cavalry, Amr held the overall field command for Muawiyah's forces in the ensuing weeks-long Battle of Siffin and on occasion personally participated in direct combat, though without particular distinction. At one point in the battle, he raised a black fabric given to him by Muhammad at the tip of his spear, symbolizing the command role given to him by Muhammad. As the Iraqis gained the battlefield advantage, Amr proposed to Muawiyah that their men tie leaves from the Quran at the tips of their lances in an appeal to Ali's men to settle the conflict peacefully. It served as a successful ruse which ended the fighting as the battle turned in Ali's favor and sowed uncertainty in Ali's ranks. The caliph heeded the majority will in his army to settle the matter diplomatically. An arbitration was agreed with Amr representing Muawiyah and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari representing Ali. Amr met with Ali once and the two exchanged insults, but Ali ultimately agreed to Amr's condition that he omit his caliphal title, Amir al-Mu'minin, Commander of the Faithful, from the preliminary arbitration document drafted on the 2nd of August. The omission effectively placed Ali and Muawiyah on an equal political footing and thereby weakened Ali's leadership position over the Muslim polity. Amr and Abu Musa likely met twice, at Damat al-Jandal and then Adrur, to forge an agreement. At Damat al-Jandal, Amr succeeded in gaining Abu Musa's recognition that Uthman was wrongfully killed, a verdict opposed by Ali and which strengthened Syrian support for Muawiyah, who had taken up the cause of revenge for the death of his kinsman Uthman. At the last meeting in At-Ruhr, the office of the caliphate was discussed, but the meeting ended in violence and without agreement. During the brawl, Amr was physically assaulted by a Kufan partisan of Ali, but the latter was fended off by one of Amr's sons. Abu Musa retired to Mecca, while Amr and the Syrians returned to Muawiyah and recognized him as Amir al-Mu'minin before formally pledging allegiance to him in April/May 658. As a result, Amr was among those invoked in a ritual curse issued by Ali during the morning prayers and became the subject of derision among the Kufan core of Ali's supporters. As early as 656–57, Amr and Muawiyah persuaded Ibn Abi Hudhayfa, who had seized control of Egypt after Uthman's assassination, to meet them in al-ʿＡṣ, where they took him captive in a ruse. Amr and Muawiyah did not advance further than this point and Ibn Abi Hudhayfa was executed. Ali's second governor in Egypt, Qais ibn Sa'd al-Ansari, was dismissed in late 657 due to concerns that he would defect to Muawiyah, and his next appointee, Malik al-Ashdar, died in Qiyam, Suez, on his way to the province. Al-Ashtar's replacement was Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, son of the first caliph and a foster son of Ali. Ibn Abi Bakr burned the homes and arrested the families of pro-Uthman mutineers from the Fustat garrison led by Muawiyah ibn Hudayj al-Kindi and Maslama ibn Mukhalid al-Ansari. The latter two requested intervention by Muawiyah, who dispatched Amr to Egypt with a 4,000 to 6,000 strong army. Despite his 13-year absence from Egypt, Amr nonetheless mustered the support of Egypt's original Arab military settlers and their sons. In July/August 658, his forces defeated Ali's troops at the Battle of al-Muzanna between Heliopolis, Ain Shams, and Fustat. He subsequently captured Fustat. Ibn Hudayj pursued and captured Ibn Abi Bakr, and had him executed over the objections of Amr, who had been lobbied by Ibn Abi Bakr's brother Abd al-Rahman to spare his life. As per his agreement with Muawiyah, Amr was installed as governor of Egypt for life and ruled as a virtual partner rather than a subordinate of Muawiyah, who had become caliph after Ali's assassination and his son al-Hasan's abdication in 661. On the 22nd of January of that year, Amr escaped an assassination attempt by the Qayyite Zardaway or Amr ibn Bakr, who killed Amr's stand-in for the Friday prayers, Khawaja ibn Hudafa, mistaking the latter for Amr. When the Qayyite was apprehended and brought before him, Amr proclaimed, "You wanted me, but God wanted Khawaja." And he personally executed him. Amr was permitted by the caliph to retain personally the surplus revenues of the province after the payment of the troops' stipends and other government expenses. He increased the original garrison at Fustat, numbering some 15,000 soldiers, with the Syrian troops he brought with him. According to the historian Clive Foss, Amr ruled the country successfully, and with considerable independence and privilege, until his death. Amr died of natural causes over the age of 90. Accounts vary regarding the date of his death, though the most credible versions place it in 43 R, 663 to 664 CE. He was buried at the foot of the Mokattam Hills to the east of Fustat. Due to the early Muslims' reticence to mark the graves of their dead, Amr's burial place has not been identified. In a testament to the personal wealth that he accrued, at the time of his death, he left 70 sacks of gold dinars. His sons Abd Allah and Muhammad refused inheritance of the sums, which were then confiscated by Muawiyah. Abd Allah succeeded his father as governor for a few weeks until Muawiyah replaced him with his own brother Utbah. The traditional Egypt-based Arabic and Coptic sources regard Amr positively. The major source of information about the Muslim conquest of Egypt and the province's early Arab military generations, Ibn Abd al-Hakam, d. 871, commends Amr for his leadership of the Egyptian conquest and as the upholder of the interests of Egypt's troops and their families against the central authorities in Medina and later Damascus. The Egyptian Arab tradition holds that Amr was personally praised by Muhammad and was a man of wisdom and piety on his deathbed. The nearly contemporary Coptic historian John of Nikiu, fl. 680–690, who was generally critical of Arab rule, said of Amr that he had no mercy on the Egyptians, and did not observe the covenant they had made with him, but also says of him that, he exacted the taxes which had been determined upon but he took none of the property of the churches, and he committed no act of spoliation or plunder, and he preserved them throughout all his days. In the words of Kennedy, of his, Amr's, competence as a military commander and politician there can be no doubt, the results speak for themselves, but he also has a reputation for straight dealing and justice. Amr's roughly 2-year conquest of Egypt was the quickest in the history of the early Muslim conquests. Though demographically Egypt remained largely non-Arab and non-Muslim for centuries after the conquest, the country has been continuously ruled by Muslims until the present day.